the Wednesday, December 13th, 2017 Planning Board meeting for the Town of Raymond. Planning Board will come to order. We do have a quorum. Could we have roll call, please?
Sheila Burke.
Greg Foster.
Bruce Sanford.
Ed Kranich.
This is a public proceeding, and unless the board specifically votes to go into executive session, you have the right to hear everything that is being said and to look at all of the exhibits that are presented. Please notify the chairman if you are unable to hear or to see. The board works from a published agenda and will be considering tonight's items in the following order. Old business, tabled application, Kevin Gagnon Jr. and Jenna Gagnon for Cedar Lane, requesting approval for private road extension. No new business. We have planning communications, findings of fact, and Mylar signing for higher wire hydroponics, and finding of fact and Mylar signing for A La Mexicana Restaurant, Robert and Laurie Mason, on Route 302. In each instance, the burden is upon the applicant to demonstrate compliance with the provisions of the applicable ordinances. After the board votes on the merits of each project application, it will prepare a written notice of decision. Generally speaking, appeals must be filed with the Superior Court within 30 days of this board's decision. Also, to be certain that you preserve your individual right to file any such appeal, you must be certain that this board's record evidences your participation this evening. All persons speaking, including representatives of the applicant and members of the public, are asked to stand at the lectern, state their name, address, and affiliation with the project, if any. You must sign the sign-in sheet if you are speaking tonight. Has anybody ever signed the sign-in sheet? We say you're supposed to do it. It would be nice if you would please do so. All persons speaking shall address the chairman. Okay, we have a tabled application, Kevin Gagnon Jr. and Jenna Gagnon. I'd like to ask the town planner to please bring us up to speed on his updated review memorandum and where we stand on the project.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. As mentioned, this project did come before you last month as a kind of a workshop item. Since that time, there has been a site walk conducted by the Planning Board to review the conditions at Cedar Lane and the proposed Malibu Drive. The applicant submitted an updated plan taking into consideration some of the items we discussed, and per my memo generated on December 6th. The road, as described, does come off of Cedar Lane, which is a private road, off of Sloan's Cove Road. It's about 400 feet in length. It has a hammerhead turnaround, and it will serve one residential lot for the applicant. At the last meeting we had, there were some comments from the neighbors about concerns of drainage and runoff. The applicant has come back and has pitched the road so that it drains to the uphill side and will be collected in 2 infiltration basins near the end of the road before discharging onto the abutter's lot. They provided calculations which well are below the requirement to meet the pre and post conditions. We prepared a memo this evening with a few conditions on that. We feel this is ready for approval. However, the board must go through and discuss all the items. We've received declaration of maintenance for the private road, and we received a request for some waivers. The waivers should be gone through first before you get into any of the actual standards. The waivers have to do with conditions on Cedar Lane, which they did not show on their plan, which is a submission requirement of the application. So there's a waiver request for topography and materials in Cedar Lane, and there's a waiver, I believe, for the drainage conditions on Cedar Lane, as those are not impacted in any way by the design of Malibu Drive, which is the proposed road. Just for clarification, early on this was shown, Malibu Drive was shown as Cedar Lane Extension. We did ask that they revise this with a new name just for clarity purposes in E911, because Cedar Lane to Cedar Lane Extension may be confusing, and there's actually a future consideration for Cedar Lane in the future with George Bartlett, one of the other abutters here, which is not being reviewed this evening. So with that, we have Malibu Drive as the proposed name. It will be private and held in one entity, which is the actual owners. Gladly take any questions at this time the board may have, or we can ask the applicant to continue with any additional information.
Does anybody have any questions they want to ask the planner about his memorandum at this point? Moving forward, I'd like to invite the engineer and the applicants to please step to the lectern and bring us up to speed on.
Sure. This on? Good. Yeah. Thank you. My name is Dustin Roma, civil engineer working on the project with Kevin and Jenna Gagnon. And Mr. Seymour gave a pretty thorough update of kind of where we stand right now. Since we were last in front of the board, we did provide some additional stormwater management features on the project, and also provided the additional information that Mr. Seymour alluded to. So we've been kind of just working in close collaboration to make sure that the board and the town has the information necessary to make a decision on this project. We also, we've read the waiver requests and the conditions of approval that have been listed in the proposed findings of fact, and we're agreeable to the conditions as proposed, and we're happy to certainly answer the questions as they come through on each of those waiver requests if the board has any questions about those. And other than that, I think we're ready. We're here to answer questions.
Mr. Chairman, I think what we need to do is go through the individual waiver requests. Some of them refer back and are integrated with some conditions that have been outlined. So
They seem to interface quite a lot, yeah.
in most of them,
do.
yes. So I think we just need to go through each condition as a board because they're waivers to the technical requirement. We do need to vote on those and then go back condition by condition to make sure that the applicant, that we're all on the same page with that. I think we are, but
You are at a public hearing, so it is open. You need to open it to the public.
Well, we had a public hearing already.
Did we have the one on this?
Yeah, we had one last month.
Okay. Well,
Yeah.
I mean, if there's somebody from the public, we may want to listen
yes,
to them if there is
open it
anybody.
up.
Yeah, I'm not inclined to open it for a public hearing. We had one. If there's anybody in the audience that has a burning desire to speak, raise your hand.
He makes it so easy.
Otherwise, I'm not inclined to open it again for a public hearing.
No trouble.
Either one of the applicants have anything they want to add at this point? What their engineers brought up? Anything else, Dustin, you want to discuss right now?
Nope, just happy to answer questions.
Okay, so we'll
I
start
think,
to-
yeah, moving on to the individual waiver requests, they seem to relate around items B and I in.
Yeah, and these are interrelated because you've got conditions under the private road standards and you have
Thank you.
submission requirements under the site plan review, and these both kind of, like you said, intertwine. So there's, I think there's actually 4, and I think they've added another one, which I'm not sure if you can waive or not. It has to do with the performance guarantee.
Correct.
That one is one that I've left off because I don't think you have the authority to change the performance guarantee
Correct.
standard. But all the others you do because those are standards within the application process. Performance guarantee is a post.
Well, looking through your memorandum, Jim, the ones that you seem to note that will require waivers are paragraph A on page 3. The treatment should be attempted to be placed in a larger and deeper infiltration area on the owner's lot at the location where it is shown.
Yeah, and they have revised
They've done
that. They've done that.
Perhaps if we go back to the applicant, to DM Roma's report, to the specific waiver requests.
Right, which is the November 8th
Yes.
letter.
November 22nd, actually.
So they have indicated that there is adequate soil depth
No.
for groundwater infiltration?
No, let's
No.
take one
We need
step.
to go to, we need to deal
Yes.
with the waiver requests first.
Correct,
And then where applicable, come back to these.
correct.
Because if, as you go later in that memorandum.
Okay, you name this as a potential condition.
Right,
Okay,
there's,
all right,
there's
all right.
two sections in Jim's memorandum that outline conditions for the plan, which all parties have read and I think agreed to. So if we go to DM Roma's
November 22nd.
November 22nd letter, we need to go item through their waivers. They're integrated with both the land use and the street ordinance. Correct, Tim?
Yes.
And
Yes.
that's where we're getting into paragraphs D and I under section 4.2 of the street ordinance,
Correct.
correct?
Correct.
Okay. I don't know if I need to read the language specifically of paragraph D. It basically talks about the kind, size, location, material profile, and cross-section of existing and proposed drainage pipes, culverts, and structures. The applicant is indicating that they're providing that for their particular length of the private way extension. They're not providing that for adjacent existing areas of the existing road or trail that goes in there because it's been existing for a long time. Comments from the board on that?
Well, I think in general, if we review, it gets a little complicated because we have prior history of the road that existed, the portion that could be considered a backlot driveway in history, and we have to remember that this is only dealing with access to the particular lots that are under discussion at this time, Kevin's. And I think if you go through Jim's memo, I think the request to waive, but again, they're very specific, not necessarily, to waive certain items outside of the area that we're talking about is more than reasonable. I feel it's more than reasonable.
Yeah, to help you along, maybe I should hand these out now. I took the liberty of starting to prepare a findings of fact for this project, so I've kind of laid that out in this.
So for example, Mr. Chairman, they're asking for a waiver for the surveyed topographic map of the site showing existing and proposed contours at no more than 2-foot intervals. What we're proposing is that we place a condition on the plan that there'll be a field construction topography and it will be adjusted as needed on site.
Right, because what they did is they used satellite imagery, LiDAR, which usually is very accurate, but there are times that it can be off a little bit, and we just want to verify that the field conditions match the satellite. So we'll ask them to verify that their elevations are on and provide us a plan, or just when we're finished with this, if it's off a little bit, that's fine. We'll just get an as-built drawing of the changes.
And for example, on item 7, the water courses, wetlands, marshes, et cetera, what we are saying is that we just wanted officially documented on the plan that there are no wetlands, water
Okay,
courses.
yeah.
Okay,
Here
you
I
see-
see where the waivers are clearly laid out. I was searching for them in the Sebago Technics Review Memorandum.
No,
Yeah.
they're,
It's on your findings that I just provided you there.
Yeah.
I tried to lay it out a little more clearly.
Well, let's discuss the Article 6 first, the waiver request for the criteria for the topographic survey. We'll take these in order.
and again, I feel, my opinion on that is it's perfectly reasonable. Jim seems to be okay with that as long as we place a condition on the plan.
Yeah, I don't disagree with that. I don't, it's been existing for a long time. They've addressed the water flow within the site, to contain it within the site. So what is happening on the abutting land that's not affected by this extension, it's not really being improved, seems to be moot. Do we have a motion on the waiver
I move
on this item?
I'm not sure which technical point that is within the regulation,
I
Jim.
think if you go, again, like you said, it's kind of, it doesn't really matter, you can pick one or one or the other, because
Okay.
we're just going to bounce them back and forth. But I think if you go to the findings of fact I just gave you,
Waivers, gotcha.
I think under the waivers, I tried
Yes.
to locate those.
I move that we waive Article 10, Section D6, topographic map.
Want a second on that?
Second.
Any discussion by the board on the item? All in favor? Opposed? Item carries.
Then we have item 7, and...
Yeah, item 7 is stormwater management and phosphorus export of the proposed private street. A waiver's request because the access existed as a private street prior to the proposed lot use. Discussion by the board on that.
I think, again, we have seen additional information provided by the applicant regarding retention basins and a drip edge, things that we discussed the last time. That's been added. When we get into conditions, there's a couple of other items that we need to discuss. But as far as this, they've moved to the point system, and I think our consulting engineer is fine with that.
They've also graded the road to the
Correct.
the upslope side.
The upland side.
Correct.
So I think this is more than a reasonable request.
Any other discussion? We have a movement on that
I
item.
move that we waive Article 10, Section D7,
Second.
stormwater management.
Any other discussion by the board? All in favor? Opposed? Carried 4-0. Next item, Article D9, or Article 10, Section D9, waiver request for location of existing culverts of the proposed private street as the access existed as a private street prior to the proposed lot use. I think the discussion is going to be the same as the other two, but I'll ask for the board's comment.
That's pretty much, it's the same thing. It's within the existing.
Yeah.
Okay. You want to make a motion on that one?
I move we waive Article 10, Section D9.
Second.
Any other discussion by the board on that? For a vote, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Carries 4-0.
If I can help the board with the next one, it falls under the street ordinance, section 4.2, items D and item 1. You essentially have already voted on that through the site plan, so you can lump those all together as one as far as I'm concerned. Because you've already actually made the motion through the site
They
plan.
relate back to what we
They
did.
relate
with
back to the,
Article
we
10,
should just
that's
go through the
correct,
motion
yeah.
through that section of the ordinance, items D and 1
Correct. And then
based
we'll
on
go
the.
back to the
right.
conditions.
Right.
Okay.
Does that all make sense to everybody?
You did bring up the performance guarantee. In the Sebago Technics memorandum, it seemed to indicate that we may have leeway to consider doing that, but from your statement just now, you said you didn't
I
think
don't
you did.
think you can, because when I looked at it, the waivers can only be done for the actual standards and requirements, and that one does not fall under standards and requirements. That's a post-approval situation. So I don't think the board has latitude to change that.
Right,
I think the only people that might have latitude to do that would be the Board of Selectmen.
right. And this next section on the street ordinance waivers, that is not even contained in the waiver
Right.
sections that we're discussing.
We need to have an actual vote on the street ordinance, Ds and Is, or can we
Yes, I would
Yes.
just lump them together as one motion, because
Okay,
you've carried
yeah.
forth from the site plan
Since
information.
we've already discussed those, the issues are paragraph D are the culverts, pipes, structures on adjacent areas that have already been grandfathered because they've been in place for a long time. In paragraph I, kind, size, location, profile, and cross-section of existing drainage ways and structures. Again, the argument is that the road has been in existence for some time, and development that is beyond the existing lot development really isn't pertinent. We have any board discussion on that? Want to make a motion?
I move that we waive from the street ordinance requirements, section 4.2D and 4.2I.
Second.
Any discussion by the board on that? Have a vote, all in favor? Opposed? Carries 4-0 on that.
Okay, now you can go off to the races.
Now we can go into the conditions to make
Yeah,
sure that we're
conditions of
all on the same
approval.
page.
Yeah, and what I've done is I've updated those based on what's been submitted. So you can either look at the very last page of the prepared findings of fact I've done for you, or it's actually in between the first and second page as well, but it's in there twice.
Yeah, I do have a question, Jim, based on this current condition of approval memorandum.
Yep.
One of the things that we talked is an extension of an uphill ditch along the side of the road to be set closer to the intersection of the proposed road.
And that has been provided on the most current plans.
Thank you. You've got the test pit information here, the topography is on here.
So your items 1, 2, and 3 on the last page coalesce
Yes,
all of the conditions in the review memorandum by Sebago Technic into these 3 items.
correct.
Okay.
Everything they've submitted, updates, and, per their
Okay.
response to our items.
And number 3 takes into consideration the travel width and the shoulders issue?
Correct.
Okay.
Yep, that was one that you discussed, I think
Correct.
was a fallout from the
Yep.
site walk.
The road association issue.
They have provided a document showing that there'll be a road association
Okay.
maintenance agreement.
Going back to that question, just to formalize that on the test pit log of adequate separation of infiltration pond bottoms and seasonal high groundwater elevation, do you feel we need to incorporate any more technical language in there about
No.
the type of soil and the cut on the side as far
No,
as?
seasonal high groundwater elevation will be satisfactory. That's the technical term we use for the highest elevation by either modeling or by limited factor that a site evaluator or geologist would use.
Okay, all right.
If there is a issue with the high water table being
Yes.
too high, how would that be addressed?
They would have to come back, what we'd ask for them in that case,
Redesign a road in the culvert?
we would ask them to come back, because right now, that infiltration pond is vastly oversized. So we would ask them to consider the rate with the infiltration rate at the bottom. And so basically, you can only infiltrate out the sides and review that infiltration rate to see if it still is works within the parameters of the stormwater. So they'd have to amend the stormwater if the infiltration rate if the seasonal groundwater table is below their finished pond elevation.
You have the chart I don't remember when one infiltration basin was, 10 or 15 times.
Right. It's
And the other one was
substantially, yeah.
5 to 7 times. or
Yeah,
something. It
it's
was
substantially.
quite substantial.
They've over-designed the infiltration based on the fact that they have free bottom draining. But if the bottom can only go to the groundwater, then they'll have to take the sides into account. And I still believe that they would have adequate storage. We just have to document it.
Well, I think it's probably a good thing when we were out on the site walk, the area where, if you look at the topography, on the side of the land that is toward Cedar Lane, in between their lot and the abutting lot, there's a low spot
Yep.
where you can see where the water channels through, and all of the exposed rocks going through that low spot, going back into the property, were covered with bright green moss, and
Yeah.
that was not the case on the higher land. So that indicates, I
Right.
think seasonally it may get a little boggy or a
Yeah,
little,
and there's
little
a
bit
lot
more
of-
damp down in that area.
There's a lot of hard pan and soils like that that limit the groundwater as well. So you could go 50 feet, you may not be in the hard pan. So you really need to dig a couple test pits just to verify.
So maybe oversizing those ponds is just a good safety
It's a good
factor.
safety measure either way.
Yeah, okay. Additional discussion by the board, or
just have
if
one
somebody
more
wants to make a
question.
motion on the conditions?
Hold on, Sheila's
I
got a
have one,
question.
I have one more question. The other thing that you talked about in your memorandum is making sure that we did the recording blocks, recording the registry of deeds, et cetera.
And we have those on the document.
Okay, all right. I just want to make sure all those
No,
little things you
we
got. Okay.
did go through it, but a second set of eyes is always good.
Okay.
Kind of a
thank you.
standard thing anyway. Anybody want to make a motion on the conditions?
Could we move to approve the plan with waivers and conditions and just do it all in one motion?
You can.
Yeah.
Because I've kind of incorporated that into that findings of fact already.
Yeah. I saw that, that's why I'm cheating.
Trying to help you.
Yep.
Well, anybody want to make a motion about it being a complete application at this point?
That's good.
We haven't done that. It's something we
Yep.
should do.
All right. Move, we accept the application as complete.
We have a
Second.
second? Any discussion on the board on that? All in favor? Opposed? We have complete application. We have moved the waivers. We have the conditions made. I guess we need to make a motion for approval.
I move that we approve the completed application with the granted waivers and the conditions.
As stated in the findings of fact.
Right.
With a second?
Second.
Any discussion by the board? All in favor? Opposed? Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay. Thanks for, I know it was an extra bunch of work, but we got it. Thank you.
So as part of that other, we can sign there. Do they have a copy of your Mylar and plan?
No.
You don't, okay. Okay. So we can sign the findings of fact this evening. We'll just have to wait on the signing of the Mylar.
Okay.
And whether you come in or whether we do it the next meeting, we'll see.
Moving on, planner communication. Jim, you've got findings of fact for high wire hydroponics and Ala Mexicana.
Yes, let's take them in chronological order. Let's take high wire first. Mr. Rick Light is here, who represented high wire. I've gone through, they've completed the drawings as requested, the information is requested, they've posted all of the conditions on the Mylar. I believe they are ready for signing. You have two to sign. One is the site plan, and one is for the amended easements for the right-of-way, since they're changing that. That one has to be recorded. The site plan just stays with staff and town records. So
Okay.
I have those. If, Rick, you want to make any kind of presentation to the board explaining what's going on with updates?
I saw the old structures.
Thank you, and Mr. Chairman, Rick Light from Light Environmental Design, and Sean Haggerty here from Highwire. Just briefly, the conditions, they're in the cover letter, but just for the purpose of vocalizing them, that we met. The road association has been established, and that was one of the big items of the condition of approval. And these folks put together a road association with council, Jeff Wilson, got everybody on board, had their board of directors meeting, and those documents have been recorded in the registry, and a copy was provided, a PDF copy to Jim. And the buffer, the second, I didn't bring a board because I think we're sort of in a post-approval period. The buffer, you recall, that was going to be next door, the 40-foot buffer, we've provided a draft of that. It's on the plans and on the Mylar. Meets and bounds description as the board requested, and the draft of that easement's been provided and will be recorded unless there are any comments on the language within the easement. And the easement plan, as Jim mentioned, sheet C1.1, which is the easement plan, the one to be recorded, has had all those items added. Remember, there's a multiple number of little tiny parcels have all been shown with meets and bounds descriptions. And at this point, the attorney, Jeff Wilson, will prepare individual deed easements for each parcel, for each easement, and those will be recorded. But the plan does reference each of those with meets and bounds. And the site plan has the conditions of approval added, and again, the 50-foot buffer, which is 40 feet on the other side of the property line, and 10 foot on our side, is shown on that plan. And I think that's it. And I think the last item that I discussed with Jim is that we will, prior to building permit, sit down and work through a performance guarantee for the road and the site. And at this point, I think, Sean, they're working on building plans throughout the winter. We'll probably look to break ground in the spring. Yeah, that would be the idea. Yeah, that's pretty much it. Are there any questions?
Thank you.
Thank you. The second order that will be also signed tonight is the Ala Mexicana 127 Roosevelt LLC plan. They provide us with the Mylar for that as well, and they're actually working on the foundation as we speak, and I believe the diner is en route.
Oh, cool.
So that's moving along as well. So those are the items that we have. Looking forward to next month. At this time, we do not have any known applications forthcoming. There's still a little bit of time, but I'm doubtful that we're going to see anything this time of year. So it may be beneficial to do our training with legal to go over parameters for the board to review and ask any questions that we have about anything within the ordinance. Mary's trying to reach Mary Costigan to set that up in potentially January.
Could we also perhaps start to figure out when or how we're going to do the design standard reviews?
The guidelines?
Yeah,
The guidelines.
We keep talking about.
Yeah, I think that's a great question to bring up to her about
Okay.
how we would go about that, because that's a little bit more complex. I mean, it's drafted as guidelines, but yet we've adopted it into part of the site plan ordinance, so I think it's a better question for her. It's more of a legal question, I think, how we move either that in or out. So that's all I have. If you guys have any questions for me, feel free.
Again, I want to thank you for the detailed work you did on the memorandum. I know there was a lot of stuff flowing in and out of there, but I appreciate the help putting it together.
Any other business anybody else wants to bring up?
I just want to say hi to Scott. Hi, Scott. How's it going over there?
Going great.
I had a tree permit come by, so I know things are coming out now.
Yeah. Probably not as fast as everybody would like them to currently, but
Never.
we're getting there.
Never.
Yeah.
A tree permit.
You have a motion to adjourn?
Oh,
It's about to fall over, yeah.
No,
fall
we'll stay
over.
here all night, Bruce.
Anybody want to
move to adjourn.
I'd second. Everybody seconds.
Discussion? All in favor? All right.
Aye, aye.